It was 6 o'clock in the morning when I heard the knocking at the door. They weren't normal knocks, like the ones the mail carrier gives, or some distracted neighbour. They were hard, insistent, desperate knocks, the kind of knocking that wakes you up with your heart racing, with that feeling that something bad is happening. I sat up in bed, confused, trying to figure out what was going on. It was still dark outside. The light of dawn was just beginning to filter through my bedroom curtains. Who could be knocking at my door at this hour? I thought about ignoring it, about lying back down and pretending I hadn't heard anything. But the knocking continued, getting more urgent, more desperate. I got up, put on the robe I always leave hanging next to the bed, and walked barefoot across the cold hallway of my house. Every step I took toward the door increased my nervousness. Something in the air felt strange, heavy, as if the morning itself knew this day wouldn't be like the others. I reached the entrance and looked through the peephole. It was Robert, my longtime neighbour, the man who lived 3 houses down, the same one who had helped me fix the yard when George died 5 years ago. But this wasn't the calm, kind Robert I knew. His face was pale, distraught. His eyes were wide open, filled with something I immediately recognized. Fear. Genuine, deep fear, the kind that can't be faked. I opened the door slowly, barely enough to see him better. He took a step forward, practically tripping over his own words. "Mary, listen to me carefully. Don't leave the house today. Please, trust me. Don't go out for any reason." His voice trembled. Robert never trembled. He was a 70-year-old man, an ex-military service member, someone who had seen things in his life I couldn't even imagine. And there he was, in front of me, begging me to listen to him with an urgency that chilled my blood. "What? Robert? What are you talking about? What's going on?" He looked behind him, out at the empty street, as if expecting to see something or someone. Then he looked back at me, and for a moment I thought he was going to tell me everything. But he didn't. He just shook his head, with an expression of anguish I had never seen on him before. "I can't explain now. Just stay home. Lock the doors. Don't open for anyone, not even if they look like officers. Do you understand me? No one." A shiver ran down my spine. Officers? What was he talking about? Why couldn't he just tell me what was happening? "Robert, you're scaring me. Tell me, what is it?" "You'll understand this afternoon. I promise you'll understand. But right now I need you to trust me. Please, Mary. Please." And before I could answer, before I could demand a real explanation, he was already backing away, moving down the driveway. I watched him disappear into the dim morning light, walking fast, constantly looking side to side as if he were being chased. I closed the door with trembling hands and stood there, in the silence of my own house, trying to process what had just happened. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. What the heck was that? I walked to the kitchen, needing a glass of water, needing to think clearly. I turned on the light, and the sudden glare made me blink. Everything in my house looked normal. The table where I always eat breakfast, the mugs hanging in their place, the wall clock George gave me on our 30th anniversary. Everything was the same, but nothing felt the same. I poured myself water with hands that were still shaking and sat down on one of the chairs. Why was Robert so scared? And why couldn't he tell me the reason? He and I had a good relationship. After George died, Robert was one of the few people who genuinely cared about me. He helped me with heavy things around the house, invited me for coffee occasionally. He was always there when I needed him. But this was different. This wasn't a courtesy visit or a favor between neighbors. This was a warning, an urgent, desperate, terrifying warning. I looked at the clock. 16 minutes past 6 in the morning. Outside, the sky was slowly beginning to brighten, painting itself in shades of orange and pink. Any other day, I would be getting ready to go out. Tuesdays, I always went to the community centre to help with the children's reading program. It was something I had started doing after I was widowed, a way to fill the hours, to feel useful, not to be alone in this house full of memories. But today, Robert had told me not to leave, to stay locked inside. Why? What could be so dangerous out there that he felt the need to come to my house at 6 o'clock in the morning to warn me? I tried to rationalize. Maybe he had heard something on the news. Maybe there was a neighborhood security alert. But then, why didn't he tell me directly? Why all the mystery? And why did he tell me not to open the door, even if they looked like officers? That part bothered me more than anything else. Officers of what? Police? Government? What kind of situation requires you to distrust the authorities? I got up and walked to the living room window. I slid back just a corner of the curtain and looked outside. The street was empty and quiet. The trees swayed gently in the morning breeze. Everything looked perfectly normal. Too normal, perhaps. Then I saw it. A car parked at the end of the street, right on the corner. A grey sedan with tinted windows. It didn't belong to anyone in the neighbourhood, I was sure of that. I knew my neighbours' cars. This one was new. And something about the way it was parked, slightly angled, as if the driver wanted a clear view of the whole street, put me on edge. Had that car been there before? I didn't remember. But I didn't usually pay attention to those things either. Until today. I let the curtain drop and moved away from the window, feeling a growing paranoia. This was ridiculous. I was a 68-year-old widow, retired, with a simple, predictable life. Who would want to harm me? Why would someone be watching my house? But Robert's look was still imprinted on my mind. The fear in his eyes was real, and Robert was not a man who was easily scared. I went back to the kitchen, and this time I made myself a cup of coffee. I needed caffeine. I needed to wake up completely and think this through clearly. While the water boiled, I took out my phone. Maybe I should call someone. But who? My children lived far away. Sarah in another state, working on her law career. Mark abroad, pursuing his photographer dreams. We had talked last Sunday, our routine weekly call. Everything normal, everything fine. I couldn't call them now and tell them I was scared because my neighbour told me not to leave the house. Alarms would go off. They would want me to move in with one of them, to leave this house, this life. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. The coffee was ready, and I sat back down at the table, staring at the steaming mug. What was I supposed to do? Sit here all day waiting for what to happen? What, exactly? Robert said I would understand by the afternoon. What was going to happen in the afternoon? I took a sip of coffee, barely burning my tongue. The pain brought me back to reality. I needed to calm down. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Robert had had a nightmare or was going through something personal and didn't want to worry me with the details. Maybe. The phone rang. I jumped so much I almost spilled the coffee. My heart started racing again. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, my finger suspended over the answer button. What if it was part of what Robert had warned me about? But it could also be a normal call, a survey, a salesperson. I answered. Hello? Silence. I could hear someone on the other end, soft breathing, but no one spoke. Hello? Who is this? More silence. And then click. They hung up. I lowered the phone slowly, looking at it as if it were a strange, dangerous object. A silent call. At 6:30 in the morning, right after Robert's warning. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. I got up again, this time with more urgency, and checked all the doors in the house. The front door, locked. The back door that led to the yard, locked. The windows, all closed. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, but I also felt a little safer. I went back to the living room and sat on the sofa, clutching a cushion to my chest. Outside, the day kept getting brighter. I was inside, locked in, scared, not understanding what was happening. And the worst part of all was the wait. Robert said I would understand by the afternoon. That meant hours. Hours of being here, alone, with my imagination creating the most terrible scenarios. I looked at the clock again. 6:45. The day had just begun, and it already felt like it had lasted an eternity. The hours passed with unbearable slowness. I stayed sitting on the sofa, checking the clock every 5 minutes, feeling like time was crawling, as if the day itself was conspiring against my sanity. I tried to distract myself. I turned on the television, but I couldn't focus on anything. The news talked about the weather, politics, sports. Everything was normal. Nothing that explained why my neighbor had appeared terrified at my door. I turned off the television, and silence filled the house again. That silence I knew so well, that had been my constant companion for the last 5 years. Since George died, silence had become something familiar, almost comforting. But today was different. Today, the silence didn't comfort me. It oppressed me. I got up and walked around the house, checking the windows again, making sure everything was closed. I felt ridiculous doing this, like a paranoid old lady seeing dangers where there were none. But I couldn't help it. Every noise startled me. The wind against the windows, the creaking of the house's old wood, the distant hum of a car passing by on the street. I reached the room that had been George's and mine for 35 years of marriage. Now it was just mine. The bed perfectly made, the curtains half closed, his things still on the nightstand. I never had the courage to remove them. His watch, his reading glasses, the book he never finished. Sometimes I would come in here just to feel him close, to remember what it was like to have someone in this house, what it was like not to be alone. The children had suggested 1,000 times that I sell the house, that I move to something smaller, more manageable. "It's too big for you alone, Mum," Sarah would say every time we talked. And she was right. This 3-bedroom house, with its big yard and long hallways, was too much for a woman my age. But it was my home. It was the place where I had built my life, where I had raised my children, where I had loved and had lost. I wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. I went back to the living room and peered out the window again. The grey car was still there. It hadn't moved in 2 hours. This couldn't be a coincidence anymore. Someone was watching the street, or they were watching me. I felt a shiver. Why would someone want to watch me? I wasn't anyone important. I was just a retired widow living off her pension and the savings George had left. We had a modest life. We never had a lot of money. George worked his whole life as an accountant at a medium-sized firm. He did his job, came home, we ate dinner together, we watched television. A simple, predictable life, without secrets or mysteries, or so I thought. I moved away from the window and went to the kitchen. I needed to eat something, even though I wasn't hungry. I made a sandwich that I could barely taste. The food felt like a knot in my throat. My stomach was closed up with anxiety. The phone rang again. This time I almost dropped it. I grabbed it with trembling hands and looked at the screen. Unknown number again. Different from the one in the morning, but just as anonymous. I hesitated. Should I answer? What if it was the same person as before? I answered. Hello? Silence again. But this time I could hear something else. Background noise, as if the caller was in a public place. Distant voices. The sound of traffic. Who is it? Why are you calling me? Nothing. Just that soft, almost imperceptible breathing. And then click. They hung up again. I put the phone down on the table and sat, feeling like tears were threatening to fall. I wasn't a woman who cried easily. I had learned to be strong when George died. I had to be. But this was overwhelming me. This feeling of not knowing what was happening, of being trapped in something I didn't understand. Why were they doing this to me? What did they want from me? I looked at the clock. 10 o'clock in the morning. 4 more hours until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 4 eternal hours. I got up and started pacing around the house again, unable to stay still. I passed through the hallway full of family photos. Sarah and Mark when they were little, smiling in their school uniforms. Our wedding, me in my white dress and George so young and handsome. Vacations at the beach, birthdays, graduations. A whole life captured in frames hung on the wall. I stopped in front of a photo of George, taken a few months before he died. He was in the garden, with his gardening tools, smiling at the camera. He looked happy, healthy. No one would have imagined that 3 months later he would suffer a massive heart attack in his sleep. The doctor said it was fast, that he didn't suffer. That was supposed to comfort me, but it never really did. I missed him so much. I missed his voice, his laugh, the way he held me at night before we slept. I missed having someone to share my days with, someone who made me feel less alone in this world. What's happening, George? I whispered to the photograph. Why am I so scared? Obviously, there was no answer, just the silence of the house and the ticking of the wall clock. I kept walking and reached the study George used to work from home, when he brought papers from the office. I had never touched this room much after his death. The children helped me pack some things, but most of it was still there. His files, his folders, his desk organized in the meticulous way he always kept it. I walked in and sat in his chair. The old leather creaked under my weight. I ran my fingers over the desk surface, picking up some of the dust that had settled over the years. George spent hours here, checking numbers, doing calculations, working on things I never really understood. He was the one for numbers. I was the homemaker, the mother, the one who kept everything running while he brought in the money. That's how our marriage worked, and it had never bothered me. We were a team, each with our role. But now I wondered if I had really known my husband. Were there secrets in his life I didn't know about? Things he hid from me to protect me? I shook my head. I was being ridiculous. George was a good, honest, transparent man. There were no secrets. There were no mysteries. It was just fear talking, making me doubt everything. I got up from the chair and was about to leave the study when I heard something that chilled my blood. Footsteps. Outside. In the yard. I froze, my heart pounding against my ribs. The steps were slow, deliberate. Someone was walking along the side of my house. I approached the study window carefully, moving as silently as possible. The curtains were partially closed. I barely peeked one eye through the edge and looked outside. There was a man in my yard, tall, dressed in dark clothing, walking slowly down the side path. It wasn't anyone I knew. His hands were in his pockets, and he was looking at the house, studying it, as if he were looking for something. Panic flooded me. I backed away from the window, tripping over my own feet. Who was he? What was he doing on my property? Should I call the police? But Robert had told me not to open the door even for officers. Did that mean I shouldn't trust the police either? I peered out again, more cautiously this time. The man was still there, now looking toward the windows. For a terrible second I thought he had seen me, but he kept walking, circling the house, disappearing toward the backyard. I ran to the kitchen, where I had a view of the back patio. I arrived just in time to see him try the handle of the back door. My door. He was trying to get in. I stifled a scream. The door was locked, thank God, but he kept trying, pushing softly, testing if it would yield. I backed away from the window, my hands over my mouth, trying to control my breathing. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. After what seemed like an eternity, the footsteps moved away. I looked again. The man was gone, disappearing the same way he had arrived. I sank into a kitchen chair, shaking from head to toe. Someone had tried to break into my house. Someone was watching me, following me, testing my doors. Robert was right. Something terrible was happening. I looked at the clock with tear-filled eyes. 11:30 in the morning. There were still 2.5 hours left. How much more could I endure this? I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and wrote a message to Robert. Someone was in my yard. They tried to open my door. I'm scared. What's happening? I sent the message and waited, staring at the screen with desperation. Minutes passed. 1, 2, 5. No answer. Please, Robert, answer me. Nothing. The silence in my house was now deafening. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound was a threat. I felt like a cornered animal, waiting for the moment the predator would finally attack. And the worst thing was that I didn't even know who the predator was, or why it had chosen me. The phone rang at 12 o'clock noon, exactly at 12 o'clock, as if the caller had been waiting for that precise moment. This time it wasn't an unknown number. The screen simply said, "Police Department." My heart skipped a beat. With trembling hands, I slid my finger to answer. "Hello? Mrs. Mary Jones." It was a male voice, official, serious. "Yes, this is me. Mrs. Jones, this is Detective Michael Reed from the police department. I need you to stay calm and listen to what I'm going to tell you." The tone of his voice made my stomach churn. Something bad had happened. Something very bad. What? What's going on? "Ma'am, where are you right now?" The question threw me off. Why did he need to know where I was? "I'm at home." Why? What's happening? There was a pause on the other end. I could hear voices in the background, movement, as if the detective were in the middle of something important. "Mrs. Jones, I need you to confirm something for me. Were you at the St. Anthony Community Centre this morning?" I froze. The St. Anthony Community Centre. That was exactly where I went every Tuesday at 9 o'clock in the morning. Where I was supposed to be today. Where I would have been if Robert hadn't warned me to stay home. "No," I replied, feeling my voice tremble. "No, I've been here at home all morning. Why?" Another pause. This time, longer. When the detective spoke again, his tone was different. More cautious. More concerned. "Ma'am, this morning at 9:20, there was an incident at the community centre. A serious incident. And we have multiple testimonies from people who claim to have seen you there." I felt as if the ground was opening up beneath my feet. "What? No, that's impossible. I wasn't there. I'm telling you, I was at home all morning." "I understand, ma'am, but I need you to understand the gravity of the situation. There are witnesses who identified you. There are even recordings from the centre's security cameras." "That can't be." It has to be a mistake. I didn't leave my house. Mrs. Jones, is there anyone who can corroborate that you were at home this morning? Any family? Any neighbours? I thought of Robert, but he had specifically warned me not to open the door to anyone. Did that include the police? Besides, he hadn't answered my message. I had no way to prove where I had been. I was alone, but I swear I didn't leave. What incident? What happened? The detective sighed on the other end of the line. I would prefer not to give details over the phone. Ma'am, I need you to come to the station so we can clarify this. Go to the station? Am I being accused of something? I'm not saying that, ma'am. We just need you to come give your statement and help us understand what happened. This is very serious. My mind was a chaos of contradictory thoughts. Robert had told me not to leave, not to open the door even for officers. But now the police were asking me to go to the station. What was I supposed to do? I need time to process this. I can come later. Mrs. Jones, I really need you to come now. If you weren't at the centre, as you say, then we have a much bigger problem. Someone is using your identity. The words fell on me like stones. Someone is using my identity. What did that mean? Was someone impersonating me? Why? I don't understand any of this. How is it possible that someone— That's why we need you to come in, ma'am. To resolve this. Can I send a patrol car to pick you up if you prefer? No. The word came out louder than I intended. No, Let me think. I need a moment. Ma'am, if you don't come voluntarily, I will have to— I hung up. I know it was stupid. I know I probably made things worse. But panic overwhelmed me. I dropped the phone on the sofa and held my head in my hands. What was happening? How was it possible that there were witnesses who saw me in a place I wasn't? And what incident had occurred? The detective said it was serious. How serious? The phone rang again immediately, the police department again. I didn't answer. It kept ringing once, twice, 3 times, until it finally stopped. I got up and started pacing back and forth across the living room, trying to think, to make sense of all this. Someone had impersonated me. Someone who knew exactly where I went on Tuesday mornings. Someone who knew my routine. And something had happened. Something serious enough for the police to call me. Something they were now blaming me for. I ran to the window and looked outside. The grey car was gone. In its place, there was now a police patrol car parked at the end of the street. 2 officers were inside, looking toward my house. Fear turned into pure terror. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to faint. This was real. Everything was real. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't overreacting. Something terrible was happening, and I was at the center of it all. I grabbed my phone again and wrote to Robert, this time with more desperation. The police called me. They say they saw me at the community center. What happened? Something serious. There's a patrol car outside my house. Robert, please, I need you to help me. I need you to explain what's happening. I sent the message and waited, staring at the screen with tears streaming down my cheeks. This time the answer came almost immediately. Don't open the door, no matter what they say. I'm coming over. Give me 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I had to hold out 20 minutes more. I looked out the window again. The officers were still in the patrol car, but now one of them was talking on the radio, probably reporting that I was home, that I hadn't left, that I wasn't answering their calls. How long would it be before they decided to come get me? Did they have an arrest warrant? Could they enter my house without my permission? I knew nothing about laws. I had never had problems with the police in my life. I had been an exemplary citizen for 68 years, and now I was hiding in my own home, terrified of the very officers who were supposed to protect me. The phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize, but different from the previous ones. I hesitated to answer, but something in me needed to know more. Hello? Mrs. Jones? It was a female voice this time, young, nervous. Who is this? My name is Ashley. I work at the St. Anthony Community Centre. Ma'am, I need to talk to you. It's about what happened this morning. My breathing quickened. What happened? No one wants to tell me exactly what happened. Well, it's complicated. The woman who was here this morning, the one we all thought was you, she did something terrible. She stole money from the donation box, more than $3,000 that we had raised for the scholarship program. And not only that, she also took files from the administrative office, personal documents from several volunteers and program participants. I slid onto the sofa, feeling my legs fail me. But it wasn't me. I didn't do that. Why would they do this to me? I know, Ashley said, and her voice sounded genuinely confused. That's why I'm calling you, because something doesn't add up. That woman, she looked a lot like you, Mrs. Jones, a whole lot. But when I saw her up close, something was wrong. Her eyes, the way she walked, how she spoke. It was you, but it wasn't you. Do you understand what I mean? No, I don't understand anything. How is it possible that someone looks so much like me? And why? To steal $3,000? That's what doesn't make sense, Ashley continued. $3,000 is money, yes, but someone who took the trouble to impersonate you, to know your routine, your schedule, why risk it for that amount? And the files she took were specific files, as if she knew exactly what she was looking for. What kind of files? I can't give details, ma'am, but they were sensitive documents, personal information. The director is furious, and the police are investigating, but I felt like I had to call you, because when I saw that woman this morning, something inside me told me something was wrong, and now that I know it wasn't really you, everything makes more sense. Did you tell this to the police? Yes, but they are focused on finding you. They have your fingerprints on the box, witnesses who identified you. For them, it's an open and shut case. My fingerprints? How can they have my fingerprints if I wasn't there? There was an uncomfortable silence on the other side. I don't know, ma'am, but they have them. Detective Reed told me. I hung up the phone feeling like I was going to throw up. My fingerprints. How was that possible? How could someone have my fingerprints? Then I remembered. 2 months ago, I had gone to the bank to renew some documents. They asked for my digital fingerprints for the new debit card. A standard procedure, they said. Something for extra security. Was it possible that someone had accessed that information? That they had used it? I looked at the clock. 10 minutes had passed since Robert's message. 10 more minutes. But then I heard something that made my blood freeze. Footsteps on the porch, knocking on the door. But they weren't desperate knocks like Robert's this morning. They were firm knocks, authoritative. Mrs. Jones, Police Department, we need you to open the door. I stood paralyzed in the middle of the living room, looking at the door as if it were a living creature about to devour me. The knocking continued, becoming more insistent. Mrs. Jones, we know you're in there. Please open the door. We just want to talk to you. It was Detective Michael Reed's voice, the same voice I had heard on the phone minutes earlier, but now, hearing it on the other side of my door, so close, terrified me in a way I couldn't explain. Robert had told me not to open the door, not to trust anyone, not even officers. But how could I not open for the police? Wouldn't it make everything worse if I refused? Ma'am, if you don't open voluntarily, we will have to consider other options. We don't want to come to that. Other options? What did that mean? Breaking down the door? A search warrant? My mind tried to process all the possibilities, while my feet remained glued to the floor. I approached the door slowly, making no sound, and looked through the peephole. They were two men dressed in dark suits. One of them, the one who had been speaking, was about 50 years old. Grey hair, a serious expression. The other was younger, standing slightly behind, looking around the porch as if expecting someone else to appear. We just want to clarify the situation at the community centre, the detective continued. If you really weren't there, as you claim, then we need your help to find the person who was. It's as simple as that. He sounded reasonable, logical, exactly what a real detective would say. But something in his tone, in the way he looked at me through the peephole, told me this wasn't that simple. I need to talk to my lawyer first, I finally said, surprising myself with how firm my voice sounded. The two men exchanged glances. Ma'am, you are not being accused of anything yet. We just need your statement. You don't need a lawyer for a conversation. Yet. That word resonated in my mind. I wasn't being accused yet, but I would be soon if I didn't cooperate. Anyway, I prefer to wait. The detective sighed, and for a moment I thought they would leave. But then he took something out of his pocket. A photograph. You can at least see this, Mrs. Jones. He held it up to the peephole. It was a security camera image, grainy and in black and white, but clear. It showed a woman entering the community centre, a woman who looked exactly like me. My heart stopped. It was like looking in a mirror. The same height, the same haircut, the same way of walking. She even wore clothes similar to what I would have worn, khaki pants and a light blouse with a sweater over it. That's you, Mrs. Jones. I couldn't answer. I was too shocked. Who was that woman? How was it possible that she looked so much like me? She has your face, your build, your way of dressing. The centre staff immediately recognized her. They even called her by name, and she responded. You're telling me you have an identical twin that no one knows about? I don't have siblings, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if they had heard me. The detective put the photograph away, and his expression hardened. Mrs. Jones, this is not going to go away. The longer you go without cooperating, the worse it will look for you. I suggest you reconsider your decision. I already told you I wasn't there. I don't know who that woman is, but it's not me. Then help us prove it. Come with us. Give your statement. Allow us to take your fingerprints for comparison. You already have my fingerprints, I interrupted. They told me they found them at the scene. Another exchange of glances between the two men. The younger one approached and whispered something in the detective's ear. Reed nodded slowly. It's true. We have them. Which makes your insistence that you weren't there even harder to believe. Do you understand the situation you're putting yourself in? Yes, I understood. I understood perfectly that someone had planned this very carefully. Someone who knew where I went, how I dressed, how I spoke. Someone who had somehow gotten my fingerprints. This was not a random robbery. It was a calculated operation. But why? I'm going to give you 5 minutes to open this door, Mrs. Jones, the detective said, and now his voice had a threatening tone. 5 minutes. After that, we're going to have to take more drastic measures. They moved away from the porch and walked back toward the patrol car that was still parked on the street. I watched them talk among themselves, one of them making a call on his radio. I moved away from the door with trembling legs. Where was Robert? 15 minutes had already passed. I needed him to arrive now, to explain to me what the heck was going on. I went back to the living room window and watched. The two men were still next to the patrol car, waiting. The younger one constantly looked at his watch. Detective Reed was talking on the phone, gesturing with his hands as if he were arguing with someone. Then I saw another car approaching on the street. A black sedan, newer than the other cars in the neighborhood. It parked behind the patrol car, and a woman got out. She was wearing a formal suit and sunglasses, even though the day was overcast. She approached Detective Reed, and they began to talk. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the conversation seemed tense. The woman pointed toward my house. The detective shook his head. She insisted. Who was she? Another detective? A prosecutor? My phone vibrated. A message from Robert. I'm 2 blocks away. Don't open the door. No matter what happens, don't open it. 2 blocks. He was almost here. I just needed to hold on a little longer. But then the woman in the suit started walking toward my house. Not toward the front door, but toward the side. The same path the man in dark clothing had taken this morning. She disappeared from my sight. I ran to the kitchen to see what she was doing. I saw her walking through the side yard, looking toward the windows, studying the house. She reached the back door and, to my horror, took something out of her purse. A small metallic tool. She was trying to force the lock. Panic completely overwhelmed me. I grabbed the first thing I could find, a kitchen knife from the drawer, and stood there, trembling, not knowing what to do. The woman kept working on the lock. I could hear the small metallic clicks. It was only a matter of time before she managed to open it. Then I heard a car engine accelerating. Through the front window, I saw Robert's car skidding to a stop in front of my house. He jumped out of the vehicle and ran toward Detective Reed, shouting something I couldn't hear. The two men confronted each other. Robert was gesturing violently, pointing toward my house, toward the officers. The detective tried to calm him down, but Robert didn't stop. And at that moment, I heard the definitive click of the back lock opening. The door opened slowly, and the woman in the suit stepped into my kitchen, taking off her sunglasses. When I saw her face clearly, I felt the world stop. She had my face. She didn't look like me. It was exactly me. Every wrinkle, every mark, every detail. She smiled, and it was the most terrifying smile I had ever seen in my life. "Hello, Mary," she said in my own voice. "I think you and I need to have a very serious conversation." I backed up until I hit the wall. The knife trembled in my hand. The woman calmly closed the door behind her, never taking her eyes off me. It was like standing in front of a living mirror, but a mirror that moved by its own will, that breathed, that smiled with a coldness I had never seen in my own reflection. "Don't scream," she said, raising her hands in a gesture of peace that conveyed no calm. "If you scream, the ones outside are going to come in. And believe me, you don't want that to happen." "Who are you?" My voice came out barely as a hoarse whisper. "That's a complicated question," she replied, walking slowly to the kitchen table and sitting down as if she were in her own home. "Let's say I'm someone who knows your life very well. Every detail, every habit, every little secret. What do you want from me?" She tilted her head, studying me with those eyes that were identical to mine, but that looked in a completely different way. There was something calculating in them, something ruthless. "It's not what I want. It's what other people want. I'm just the messenger, the enforcer, if you prefer to call it that. I don't understand anything you're saying." "I know. And that's precisely why we're in this situation. Your ignorance, Mary. Your blessed and convenient ignorance about who your husband really was." The mention of George made something break inside me. Fury replaced fear for a moment. Don't you dare talk about him. You don't know anything about my husband." She laughed, and the sound was disturbing coming from my own face. "I don't know anything." "Oh, Mary, I know more about George than you did in 35 years of marriage. I know about the hidden accounts, the encrypted files, the secret meetings. I know about what he discovered and what he tried to do with that information." "You're lying. George was an accountant. He worked with numbers, with companies, with corrupt companies," she interrupted, "with dirty politicians, with very powerful people who moved money in very illegal ways. And your dear George, the honest and hard-working accountant, decided he had to do the right thing. He decided to collect evidence, document everything, prepare to expose these people." I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, still clinging to the knife. This couldn't be real. George had never mentioned any of this to me. Why would he have done that? Why would he risk everything? "Because he was a noble idiot," she said with disdain. "Because he believed in justice and doing the right thing, even if it meant endangering his family. And look at him now, 5 years dead. George, paying for his decisions. His death was a heart attack. The doctor confirmed it." She looked at me with something close to pity. "Are you really that naive? 58-year-old men in perfect health don't suffer massive heart attacks out of nowhere, especially when they are about to hand over incriminating evidence to the authorities." The words hit me like punches. It couldn't be true. It couldn't be that George had been murdered and I never knew it. It couldn't be that all this time. "Why now?" I asked, tears beginning to roll down my cheeks. "Why after 5 years are they coming for me?" "Because we found something. A trail George left. A clue suggesting he didn't take all the evidence to the grave. That he left a backup copy. And we believe you know where it is." "I don't know anything. I swear to you. I don't know anything about any evidence." "That's what you said 6 months ago when we intercepted you at the bank, remember? We asked for your digital fingerprints for the new security card. A completely routine procedure." The memory came back to me with terrifying clarity. The bank employee, insistent but kind. The digital scanner. The way she assured me it was only for my protection. It was you. It was me. We needed your fingerprints to be able to use them today. To make the community center robbery look like your fault. To have leverage over you. To pressure you to cooperate. But I don't know where that evidence is. George never told me anything. She got up from the chair and approached me, crouching down to my height. Her closeness made my stomach churn. "Then you're going to have to remember. You're going to have to think about every conversation you had in his last days, every strange comment, every unexpected gift, every place he asked you to go or avoid. Because he told you something, Mary. He left you something. Men like George always leave something to protect their wives." Outside, I heard Robert's voice shouting, still arguing with the detective. How much longer could he keep them occupied? "And if I really don't know anything, what are you going to do then?" She straightened up, looking down at me with a cold expression. "Then you're going to prison for robbery and identity theft. You have your fingerprints on the donation box, multiple witnesses, and video recordings that clearly show you at the crime scene. They're going to give you years, Mary. Years locked up, away from your children, slowly dying in a cell. You can't do this. It's already done, unless you give me what I want." The front door burst open. Robert rushed into the house, immediately followed by Detective Reed and the other officer. Robert saw me on the floor, saw the woman standing in front of me, and his face went pale. "Get away from her," Robert ordered, his voice full of an authority I had never heard from him. The woman turned to face them, showing no sign of surprise or concern. "Robert Miller, it's been years. Still the loyal guardian, aren't you?" "I said get away." Detective Reed looked confusedly between the woman and me, noticing the impossible similarity for the first time. What the hell is going on here? Robert moved quickly, placing himself between the woman and me, helping me to my feet with his free hand. In his other hand, he held something that made my heart stop. A yellow envelope, old and worn. "It's time for Mary to know the truth," Robert said, looking directly at the woman. "The whole truth. George made me promise to protect her, to only tell her if danger came to her door. Well, here's the danger." He extended the envelope to me. I took it with trembling hands. On the front, written in George's unmistakable handwriting, it said, "For Mary, open only with Robert." "What is this?" "Your answer," Robert replied, "and also your condemnation, depending on how you decide to use it." The woman took a step toward us, but Detective Reed finally reacted, blocking her way. "No one moves until someone explains to me what is going on. Mrs. Jones, or whoever you are, stay where you are." I looked at the envelope in my hands, feeling its weight as if it contained all the life I thought I knew, and all the lies that supported it. George had known. He had known this would happen someday. And he had left me something. Something important enough that dangerous people would come looking for it 5 years later. "Open it, Mary," Robert urged. "It's time for you to know who your husband really was, and who you are now that he's no longer here to protect you." With trembling fingers, I began to open the envelope, knowing that what I would find inside would change everything forever. The envelope contained a letter folded in 3 parts, handwritten in George's careful script. Just seeing it made me feel his presence, as if he were there with me, trying to explain something he never had the courage to tell me in life. With trembling hands, I began to read while everyone in the kitchen waited in silence. "My dearest Mary, if you are reading this, it means the danger I so feared has finally arrived. It means I am no longer there to protect you, and that Robert has kept his promise to look after you when I couldn't. Forgive me for the lies. Forgive me for building our life on secrets you never should have had to bear. But understand that every decision I made was to keep you safe, you and our children." I had to stop, the tears blurring the words. Robert put a hand on my shoulder, giving me strength to continue. "For 20 years, I worked as an accountant for legitimate businesses. But 8 years ago, one of my clients asked me to review certain accounts for a construction company. What I found was much bigger than I imagined. A massive money laundering scheme involving high-level politicians, judges, influential business people. They were moving millions of dollars through fake projects, inflated contracts, diverted public funds." My breath hitched. George had uncovered a corruption network. Why had he never told me? At first, I tried to ignore it, Mary. I wanted to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I couldn't. I couldn't sleep knowing that those people were stealing money that should go to hospitals, schools, social programs. Money that could have saved lives. So I started saving copies. Documents, transfers, emails. Everything that proved their guilt. The woman who had my face let out a bitter laugh from where the detective was keeping an eye on her. "Your noble husband. So brave. So stupid." Robert shot her a murderous look, but didn't say anything. I continued reading. "I contacted an investigative journalist named Alan Vance. We planned to make all the information public, but someone discovered us. Alan died in a supposed car accident 2 weeks before we could publish. Then I knew they would come for me too, so I took precautions. I hid all the evidence in a safe place, a place only you could find, Mary, because it's connected to a memory only we share." My heart pounded hard. What memory? What was he talking about? "Remember our 25th anniversary?" The trip we took, the place where we renewed our vows, the small box we buried under the tree with our written promises inside. Everything is there, my love. Every document, every piece of evidence, every name. They are waiting for someone brave enough to use them. The letter continued, but my hands were shaking so much that Robert had to hold it for me so I could keep reading. Robert knows everything. He was my confidant, my protector. I asked him to watch over you from a distance, never to tell you anything unless the danger was imminent. Trust him as I trusted him. And forgive me, Mary. Forgive me for leaving you alone with this burden. But if you are reading this, it's because you now have a decision to make. You can hand over the evidence and complete what I started, risking your own safety, or you can destroy it and live the rest of your life in peace, even if that peace is built on silence. I won't judge you for whatever decision you make. Just know that I love you, that I always loved you, and that my greatest regret is not being able to be there to face this with you. Yours always, George. I let the letter drop, feeling as if my heart had been ripped from my chest. All this time, 5 years believing I had known my husband, when in reality I had been living with a stranger. A brave and foolish stranger who had decided to stand up to powerful people without even telling me. Our 25th anniversary, I whispered. We went to the cabin in the Adirondack Mountains, 2 hours from here. Robert nodded slowly. The cabin you rented for a week, where you renewed your vows under that old oak tree. The memories returned with painful clarity. It had been one of the most beautiful moments of our marriage. George had organized everything, the small but cozy cabin, the private ceremony with just the two of us, the tree under which we promised to love each other for 25 more years. We had written our promises on papers and buried them in a small metal box at the foot of the tree, saying that someday we would come back for them. We never went back. 2 years later, George was dead. The documents are there, I said, more to myself than to the others, buried under the tree. The woman with my face stepped forward, but Detective Reed firmly stopped her. Who are you? He asked her. And don't lie to me because I'm sick of this circus. She looked at him with contempt. I'm someone hired to recover something that doesn't belong to this family, something Mr. Jones stole from very important people. He didn't steal anything, I snapped, finding my voice. He documented crimes. There's a difference. A difference that cost him his life, she replied coldly. And that can cost you yours if you're not smart. Robert stepped between us, his body tense as a spring. You're not going to touch her. George made me promise, and I'm going to keep my word until my last breath. Detective Reed ran a hand over his face, clearly trying to process all the information. This is completely outside my jurisdiction. We're talking about conspiracy, political corruption, possible homicide. I need to call my superiors. No, Robert said urgently. You don't know who you can trust. If these people have the power George documented, then they have people everywhere. Police, judges, prosecutors. A call to the wrong place, and Mary will be dead before morning. The words fell on me like ice water. Dead? Was I really in that much danger? So what do you suggest I do? The detective asked, and for the first time I heard uncertainty in his voice. Let us go, Robert replied. Let us get to that cabin, retrieve the documents, and then we will turn them over to the correct authorities. Someone outside the local system, someone federal. The woman laughed. Do you really think you'll get to that cabin? My employers have eyes everywhere. Before you cross the city limits, there will already be people waiting for you. Then we'll die trying, Robert said, with a determination that scared me. But we are not going to hand over those documents to you so you can destroy them. Detective Reed looked at Robert and me, then at the woman, clearly torn between his duty and what was right. If I let you go, I'm risking my career, possibly my life. And if you don't, I said, finally finding my own determination, you will be allowing corrupt people to continue stealing and killing without consequences. My husband died trying to do the right thing. I won't let his sacrifice be in vain. There was a long silence. Outside, the other officer knocked on the door, asking if everything was okay. Detective Reed ignored him, his mind clearly working at full speed. Finally, he sighed deeply. You have 2 hours head start. After that, I have to report this. And may God help us all. Robert grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the house through the back door while Detective Reed stayed behind, blocking the woman's path. I could hear her screaming, threatening, but her words faded as we ran through the side yard toward Robert's car parked on the street. Get in, fast, he ordered, opening the passenger door. I dove inside and he started the car before I even finished closing the door. The tires screeched against the asphalt as he sped down the residential street. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I looked in the side mirror and saw Detective Reed coming out of my house, talking urgently on his radio. The woman with my face appeared behind him, her expression full of fury. Do you really think we'll get to that cabin? I asked, my voice cracking. She said they have people everywhere. We have to try, Robert replied, his eyes fixed on the road as he took a curve too quickly. George didn't die for those documents to remain buried forever. We left the neighborhood and entered the main highway. Robert was driving erratically, constantly changing lanes, taking unexpected exits to make sure no one was following us. How did you really know George? I asked, needing to understand. You said he told you everything. Why did he trust you? Robert kept his eyes on the road, but I saw his jaw tighten. Because I also worked in the shadows. 15 years ago, I was a private investigator. I specialized in corporate fraud cases. George hired me when he started to suspect something was wrong with his clients. What we found together was much worse than either of us imagined. Why did you never tell me? All these years, living 3 houses away, helping me with the yard, having coffee with me. It was all a lie. It wasn't a lie, he said firmly. My affection for you is real, Mary. But I had orders from George. I was only to reveal the truth if your life was in danger. And until today, it wasn't. How did you know today was the day? Because I've been seeing strange movements for months. Unknown cars in the neighborhood. People watching your house. Someone went through your trash last week. I knew they were preparing for something. When I intercepted a conversation early this morning, I knew it was today. That's why I went to warn you. He took another exit off the highway, and we entered a less traveled secondary route. The urban landscape began to give way to hills and trees. The cabin was in the mountains, far from the city, in a remote location George had chosen precisely for its privacy. How much longer? I asked. An hour and a half if no one stops us. But we can't take the direct route. I'm going to take detours, use secondary roads. It will take us longer, but it's safer. I looked in the rearview mirror. For now, the road behind us was empty, but I knew it wouldn't last. That woman, whoever she was, wouldn't give up so easily. Who is she? I asked. How is it possible that she looks so much like me? Robert shifted gears as we climbed a steep hill. Her name is Yolanda. She is a specialist. These criminal organizations use them to infiltrate, to impersonate identities. They have perfected techniques of prosthetic makeup, minor surgery, voice training. She has probably been studying you for months. Every gesture, every expression, every way you move. The idea made my stomach churn. Had someone been observing me, analyzing me, preparing to become me? And Detective Reed? Do you think he's really going to give us 2 hours? I hope so. He seemed like an honest man in a corrupt system. But we can't trust anyone except ourselves. We continued driving in silence for several minutes. The landscape became greener, wilder. We passed through small towns where life seemed to move slower, where people knew nothing about conspiracies or hidden documents or women who stole identities. Did you ever regret it? I asked suddenly. Helping George? If you hadn't, maybe he would still be alive. Robert gripped the steering wheel tightly. Every day. But I also know that George would have done the same with or without my help. He was a man of principles. He couldn't stand idly by while he saw so much corruption. And he left me alone. He left me with this burden. He left you the truth and the choice of what to do with it. We arrived at a small mountain town, and Robert stopped at a gas station. We needed fuel, and it was also an opportunity to check if anyone was following us. Stay in the car, he said. Keep your head down. While he filled the tank, I looked around nervously. There were few people. An old truck driver drinking coffee, a family with children buying snacks. Everything seemed normal, too normal. Robert paid quickly and got back in the car. But before starting, he looked at his phone and his face went pale. What is it? He showed me the screen. It was a text message from an unknown number. It contained only one photograph. The cabin in the mountains, our cabin, and below, a short message. We are waiting for you. My blood froze. They already knew where we were going. How was that possible? They must have tracked my phone, Robert said, immediately turning it off and taking out the battery. Oh, and yours. Give me your cell phone. I handed him my phone and he did the same, taking out the battery and throwing both phones into a nearby trash can. Without phones, we can't call for help if something goes wrong, I said. But they can't track us either. It's a necessary trade-off. He started the car again, but now his expression was much grimmer. If they are already at the cabin, what do? We can't just show up there. Robert drove in silence for a minute, thinking. Then he took a detour onto a dirt road that led into the woods. I know another way to get there. A trail that hunters used years ago. It will drop us off at the back of the property. We can approach without being seen. And if it doesn't work, then we improvise. But we're not going to give up, Mary. Not after coming this far. The dirt road was uneven and full of potholes. Robert's car protested with every obstacle. But he kept going, driving further and further into the woods. The sunlight barely filtered through the tops of the trees, creating long, ominous shadows. When was the last time you came here? I asked, gripping the seat as the car jumped over a rock. Years ago. I used to come hunting with my father. I hope the trail is still passable. It didn't look very passable, but Robert refused to stop. Finally, after 20 torturous minutes, we reached a small clearing. He parked the car behind dense bushes, concealing it as best he could. From here we go on foot. It's about a 20-minute walk to the cabin. We got out of the car, and the silence of the forest enveloped us. Only the wind among the leaves and the distant singing of some birds could be heard. Robert opened the trunk and took out a small backpack containing flashlights, water, and something that made my heart stop. A gun. Do you really think it will be necessary? I asked, pointing to the pistol he was putting in his belt. I hope not. But George made me promise to protect you no matter what. And I'm going to keep that promise. We started walking along the barely visible trail among the trees. Each step took me further away from the world I knew and closer to an uncertain future. I carried George's letter with me, carefully folded in my pocket. His words resonated in my mind. You have a decision to make. But did I really have a choice? After everything that had happened, After knowing that my husband had been murdered, that I had spent 5 years living in ignorance, could I simply turn my back? No, not anymore. George had started this, but I was going to finish it. There it is, Robert whispered, pointing between the trees. I could see the cabin in the distance, and just as the message had warned, there were 2 cars parked outside. We were not alone. We crouched behind a fallen log, observing the cabin from our hidden position. The 2 cars parked outside were black SUVs with tinted windows. I couldn't see how many people were inside the cabin, but I knew they weren't there to welcome us. The tree is on the other side, I whispered to Robert. Behind the cabin, near the creek. He studied the terrain, calculating distances and angles. If we move to the left, following the tree line, we can get there without them seeing us from the windows. But we have to be silent. A single noise and they will know we are here. What if they already know? What if they are waiting for us to do exactly this? It's a risk we have to take. We started moving slowly, crouched low, using the trees and bushes for cover. Every branch that cracked under our feet made me hold my breath. My heart was beating so hard, I was sure they could hear it from the cabin. It took almost 10 minutes to cover what would normally have been a 2-minute walk. But finally, we reached the back of the property. And there it was, the old oak tree under which George and I had renewed our vows 25 years ago. It looked older now, more gnarled, but it was still majestic. Its roots spread over the ground like ancient veins. Somewhere under those roots was the box we had buried. The box that now contained much more than our promises of love. "Do you remember exactly where you buried it?" Robert asked in a barely audible voice. I closed my eyes, trying to remember. We had been standing in front of the tree, George digging with a small shovel. I was holding the metal box. He had chosen a spot between 2 big roots on the side facing the creek. "There," I pointed, "between those 2 roots." Robert took a small folding shovel from his backpack and began to dig carefully, trying to make the least noise possible. The earth was more compacted than we expected. Years of rain and root growth had sealed the place like a tomb. Every movement of the shovel made me more nervous. How long would it be before someone came out of the cabin? Before they discovered us? After what seemed like an eternity, Robert's shovel hit something metallic. We both froze, listening to see if anyone had heard the sound. Nothing. Just the whisper of the wind and the murmur of the nearby creek. Robert removed the dirt with his hands, slowly revealing an oxidized metal box. It was bigger than I remembered. George had replaced our small promise box with something much more substantial. He carefully pulled it out of the hole. It was sealed with a combination lock. Robert looked at me. "Do you have any idea what the combination might be?" I thought quickly. George always used significant dates for his passwords and combinations. Our wedding date, the children's birthdays. But this was different. This was something that only I should be able to open. Then I knew. The date of our 25th anniversary, when we buried the original box. 270897. I turned the dial with trembling fingers. August 27th, 97. The lock clicked and opened. Inside were documents, many documents, folders full of papers, USB flash drives, external hard drives. George had documented everything meticulously. Names, dates, amounts, bank transfers. It was a complete encyclopedia of corruption. "My God," Robert whispered, quickly flipping through some papers. "This is bigger than we thought. There are national-level politicians here, Supreme Court judges, businessmen who control entire industries." "How much money?" I asked. "Hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe more. Decades of systematic theft from the public treasury." Suddenly we heard voices. They were coming from the cabin. Robert quickly closed the box and put it in his backpack. We have to go. Now. We started backing toward the tree line, but then the back door of the cabin opened. Two men came out, both armed, beginning to patrol the perimeter. Don't move, Robert whispered. If we move, they will see us. We stayed frozen behind a dense bush, barely breathing. One of the men was walking directly toward us. 30 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet. Robert put his hand on the pistol in his belt. I closed my eyes, praying silently. The man stopped barely 15 feet from our position. He took out a cigarette and lit it, looking into the woods. For a terrible moment I thought he had seen us, but then his radio crackled. Anything back there? It was Yolanda's voice, the woman with my face. Nothing. Just trees. Maybe they aren't coming after all. They'll come. They have no other choice. Keep your eyes open. The man took another drag from his cigarette, tossed the butt, and returned toward the cabin. Robert and I waited another 30 seconds before daring to move. Let's go, he whispered, slow and silent. We started backing away, step by step, moving away from the cabin. But I knew this wasn't over. They would control all the exit roads. They would be waiting for us. Robert, I whispered when we were far enough away. We can't just leave. They are going to follow us. They are going to chase us until they get those documents. I know. That's why we're not running away. He looked at me with a determination that scared me. We are going to finish this here and now. George had contacts, people he trusted. Before throwing away the phones, he sent a message to one of them. A federal prosecutor George knew, someone who is outside the corrupt system. I gave him these coordinates. He should be arriving with reinforcements in less than 30 minutes. 30 minutes? Robert? We can't last 30 minutes against armed people. We don't have to last. We just have to not be found. We returned to the car, but instead of leaving, Robert took more things out of the trunk. Flares, a rope, a hunting knife. What are you doing? Preparing. If they find us before the federal agents arrive, I need to make sure these documents don't fall into the wrong hands. He opened the box again and took out one of the USB flash drives. He handed it to me. Keep this. If something happens to me, if we get separated, you take this to the authorities. Do you understand? No matter what happens, this flash drive has to get there safely. I took the small USB flash drive, feeling the weight of it in my hand despite its tiny size. In this small object was George's life and death, his legacy, his truth. Robert, I'm scared. He put his hands on my shoulders, looking me directly in the eyes. Mary, your husband made me promise to look after you, but now I understand you don't need to be looked after. You are stronger than you think. George knew it. That's why he left this to you, because he knew you would have the courage to do the right thing when the time came. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I wiped them away with determination. He was right. I was no longer the scared widow hiding in her house. I was no longer the woman living in ignorance. Now I knew the truth, and the truth demanded action. What do you need me to do? I need you to stay here, hidden. If you hear shots, if something goes wrong, you take that car and drive to the nearest town. Look for the federal police, not local. You give them the flash drive and you tell them everything. Promise me. I nodded, although every fiber of my being wanted to protest, wanted to tell him not to leave me alone. And what are you going to do? Robert smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who has accepted his destiny. I'm going to make sure George didn't die in vain. I'm going to keep the last promise I made to my friend. Before I could answer, we heard engines. The black SUVs were moving away from the cabin, starting to sweep the area. They had discovered us, or at least they knew we were close. Robert gently pushed me toward the car. Hide. And no matter what happens, don't come out until it's safe. Robert, no. But he was already gone, moving between the trees with the backpack containing the box of documents, taking them away from me, becoming the decoy. I was left alone in the car, the USB flash drive clenched in my hand, listening to the approaching engines. The minutes that followed were the longest of my life. Hidden in the car, crouched in the back seat, I listened to the SUV engines moving through the woods, the voices shouting orders, the footsteps running between the trees. And then, the sound I feared most. Gunshots. 3 quick shots, followed by silence, then more voices, more movement. I clutched the USB flash drive to my chest, praying that Robert was okay, but knowing in my heart that he had done exactly what he promised. Sacrificed himself to protect me. Silent tears streamed down my face. George had died for this truth. And now Robert, too. How many more lives would it cost? When would this cycle of violence and secrets end? Then I heard something different. Sirens. Many sirens. And the unmistakable sound of helicopters approaching. Robert's reinforcements had arrived. What followed was chaotic. More shots, shouts, orders amplified by megaphones demanding that everyone drop their weapons. I remained hidden, trembling, not daring to move a muscle until everything went silent. Finally, someone knocked on the car window. It was a man in a bulletproof vest that said FBI in large letters. Behind him, dozens of federal agents were moving through the area, arresting the people who had been hunting us. Mrs. Jones? I'm Special Agent Ryan Miller. Robert Miller contacted us. He's safe. He's wounded, but he's going to be okay. The wave of relief that hit me almost made me faint. I got out of the car with trembling legs, and the agent held my arm. I have the documents. I showed him the USB flash drive. He took it carefully, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. And maybe it was. This is going to change a lot of things, Mom. A lot of very powerful people are going to fall because of what your husband documented. They took me to where Robert was being treated by paramedics. He had a bullet wound in his shoulder, but he was conscious and smiling when he saw me. We did it, he said in a weak voice. George would be proud. I knelt beside him, taking his hand. You're an idiot. You could have died. But I didn't die, and now the truth is going to come to light. I saw Yolanda being handcuffed and placed in one of the federal vehicles. When she passed by me, our eyes met. There was no longer any similarity between us. She was just another criminal being brought to justice. The days that followed were a whirlwind. George's documents unleashed the biggest corruption scandal in decades. 14 high-level politicians were arrested, including 2 senators and a governor. Judges, business people, public officials, all fell like dominoes. The money laundering scheme had moved more than $300 million over 20 years. George's name was vindicated. The media called him a hero, a brave accountant who dared to stand up to the corrupt system. His death was officially reclassified as homicide, and new investigations were opened. Robert recovered from his injury and was recognized for his bravery. Detective Reed, who had given us those 2 crucial hours, was promoted and placed in charge of a new anti-corruption task force. But for me, none of that mattered as much as the truth. I finally knew who my husband had really been. Not the quiet man who read the newspaper every morning, but the silent hero who risked everything to do the right thing. 3 months later, I returned to the cabin, this time alone, on a sunny and peaceful day. I walked to the old oak tree and sat down in its shade, touching the earth where we had buried our promises so many years ago. I took out a new letter I had written, folded carefully. In it, I told George everything that had happened, how I had found my courage, how I had completed his mission. I told him I forgave him for the secrets, that I understood about why he had done it. And I promised him that I would live the rest of my life honoring his memory, not hiding from the world, but facing it with the same bravery he had shown. I dug a small hole and buried the letter under the tree, along with the ashes of the fear I had carried for so many years. When I got up to leave, I felt different. I was no longer the fragile, scared widow who had been awakened by desperate knocks on her door. I was a woman who had faced danger, who had uncovered terrible truths, who had risked her life for justice. I was a woman who now knew that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth uncovering, because the truth is the only thing that truly sets us free. I drove back home as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky with orange and pink colours. Sarah and Mark were coming to visit that weekend. We had a lot to talk about, many things to heal, but now we could do it from a place of honesty, without secrets separating us. My house no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a home, a place where I had loved, where I had lost, where I had discovered my own strength. And every night, before I sleep, I look at George's photograph on my nightstand and whisper the same words. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for believing I would be strong enough. And thank you for loving me enough to protect me, even after your death. Because in the end, that's what it all had been. A final act of love from a man who knew that his wife had the courage within her to change the world, if only she was given the opportunity to discover it. And I had discovered it. The truth had come to light. Justice had prevailed. And I had learned that it is never too late to become the hero of your own story. That morning, when Robert knocked on my door at 6 o'clock in the morning with his desperate warning, I was just a scared woman. But by the end of the day, I had become something much greater. I had become someone who refused to live in ignorance, who chose truth over comfort, who risked everything to do the right thing. And that, I discovered, was the most important lesson George had wanted to teach me. Not that I needed to be protected from the world, but that I had the strength to face it. Now, every morning when I wake up, I look out my bedroom window and see a new day full of possibilities. I am no longer afraid of the shadows or the secrets, because I have learned that the light always finds a way to shine, no matter how much they try to hide it. And that light now lives in me, guiding me forward, reminding me that I am stronger than I ever imagined, that I am the guardian of George's legacy, that I am a survivor, that I am a fighter, that I am Mary Jones. And my story doesn't end here. It is just beginning.